And hi, everybody. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. It's your host, Bill Whittle, here for episode 134 of the most extraordinarily well-produced show on the internet, especially when it comes to support and administrative duties and that kind of thing. I'm your host, Bill Whittle, and it's been, as we say in the biz, a pretty slow news week. Anything happening now, I have to check the news every 15 minutes. I feel like if I don't check the news every 15 minutes, I'm going to miss something of earth-shaking importance. So here's kind of where we are. I had heard first. Let me just adjust this for a second. The other way. First time I've heard this expression used, and I heard it on a video earlier today, and what some people are talking about, what we're seeing now, is some people are calling it a coup by the FBI. I think it's much more appropriately been called a counter coup. It's not a revolution. It's a counter revolution. Things have changed, and they changed so much that you don't really ever know what you're getting. But I will say this: this is unbelievable. It appears, again, with that 2016 caveat on the front. It appears that a lot of the motivation behind Comey's recent admission that they're going to be reopening the Clinton email case, I thought, well, okay, he was trying to, blink out a message to us in July, and he didn't. I thought he should have resigned, and he didn't. And then he came forward to say we're going forward with the probe, and I thought, okay, way to go, Comey, and way to go, awesome forces of justice. And what is beginning to look like is that rather than walking out on the job, which is what many people threatened the FBI would do if charges did not come back as recommended against Hillary Clinton, a fair number of FBI agents may be in on, again, just speculation, okay, because I know this just sounds so crazy, but I think it might be true. There's some speculation out there now that says that a number of people at the FBI have seen the evidence that not only implicate, the one name that's been very, very low-key in this last couple things with the email scandal is Barack Obama. But basically, he emailed Hillary Clinton probably thousands of times on an unsecure server, knew full well it was unsecure, sent it on he used a secret code name, you see. And it looks like somebody at the FBI, probably a bunch of people at the FBI, have realized that, okay, the Justice Department is essentially not just corrupt, it's overrun, it's gone, it's fallen. The office of the president is essentially fallen. This is a giant criminal conspiracy, and part of it is actual national security issues like Emailgate and pay for play and all the rest of it, and part of it is just actual criminal activity. Here's $1.5 million. Well, there's a trade restriction lifted, and I think he knows what's going on. I think that basically what seems to be happening is the FBI agents, just rank and file guys, are saying, no, look, we're not going to just sit here and watch this criminal get elected without the American people knowing what's going on, which to me is the biggest point of this whole thing, right? You'll hear people say, well, the FBI is tampering with an election, or it's that damn Anthony Weiner's fault, or it's the Russians, or it's WikiLeaks' fault. Okay, what is the fault? And there's no question that WikiLeaks and the FBI are trying, or at least wherever these emails are coming from, there's no question they're trying to influence the election. They're absolutely trying to influence the election, and the way they're trying to influence the election is by telling the truth to the American people. By telling the truth to the American people. That's how they're trying to influence the election. They're trying to tell the American people the truth. You'll notice that none of this is doubted. None of them say, that's not our emails. You won't hear Podesta say that. You won't hear Hillary say that. You don't hear, you don't hear Uma Abedin say anything, really, because she's in, pre-bus treatment. She's getting the tire marks painted on her face, and not just her face. So nobody ever comes out and says, well, this isn't true. And they know they can't say it's not true because it is true, and nobody doubts that it's true. Everybody knows that it's true. So how can we deflect this horrible damage that's bleeding out every day? It's the Russians are trying to influence our election, those damn Russians. If it takes Vladimir Putin to report the truth to the American people, then I say go Vladimir. I really, genuinely, honestly do. If the what is it, FSB, whatever the KGB used to be, is trying to influence the American people by releasing actual, genuine emails of criminal activity at the top levels of the United States government, then I say thank you and do svidaniya. Spasiba, do svidaniya. No one's denying that this stuff is true. And this is what I have to wonder about with the Hillary supporters. The fact that she has any supporters left, of course, is a mystery to the rest of us. We think she's a felon. They think Trump is a blowhard. But it's still not really up for discussion that she does all these things. We talked about it in one of these right angles, I think, is that the problem, maybe it was last week on the Stratosphere Lounge, the problem is the company you keep, right? We believe that the country should be kept safe. Many of us listening are either military, former military, or we have people who have family in the military, and national security is not a joke to them. Shouldn't be a joke to anybody. But to them, the idea of somebody who'd sell out the country for money, who'd sell out our uranium supplies, for example, for money, that's unacceptable. I mean, honestly, it's just unacceptable. And they look at it as, well, Trump's going to be an embarrassment. He's going to say stupid things, and my foreign friends are going to laugh at us, and they're going to make us think we're a bunch of idiots. That's what bothers them the most, is they don't want to be embarrassed. So, there you go. There you go. I like to think that I just heard this shaping up an hour or two ago. Brent says it was 16 different United States intelligence agencies. I hope to God it was. I hope to God it was. I genuinely do. If it turns out that at the 11th hour, and probably been planning this for a while, if it turns out that at the 11th hour, patriots inside our national security institutes have looked at the evidence and decided, here's what they've done in terms of influence the election, you miserable progressive fascists. Here's what they've done. They've decided to tell the American people the truth. That's what they did. They decided to tell the American people the truth. They didn't invent these emails, and they didn't invent this. Is not an operation. This is not Black Ops or something. They just decided to tell the American people the truth. And you're outraged about that. And you can actually hear them say it. And Rachel Maddow and all these people. It's like, why did they have to open this now, 11 days before the election? Why couldn't they have waited until after the criminal was elected president, and at which point she could pardon herself? What's the matter with these FBI people telling the American people the truth this close to the election? That's pretty much it, right? That's pretty much it. How dare you tell the American people the truth this close to the election? That's just not fair. If it's true, I hope it's true. I'm becoming more convinced it's true. Then this not only will be a sign our republic is not quite as sick as we thought, but it will be a sign that despite the fact that the forces of darkness get bigger and bigger every day, there are two little hobbits heading towards Mount Doom with a ring in their hand, and you just never know when it could turn around. Now, Trump is surging. We did a segment on, I think it was momentum for members this week, and I just want to say very quickly. This is painful analogy for me, this idea of momentum, especially in a football game, because something like 5-6 weeks ago, somewhere in there, I watched the Gators with a 28-point lead or a 24-point lead over Tennessee, and going into the fourth quarter, and Tennessee scored, 33, 35 unanswered points. So just to cover some of the ground we covered in that members-only video, I think momentum is an interesting thing. We're kind of off the whole email thing, not just talking about Trump's chances and so on. I think you can see the same evidence of what we're seeing in politics as you would see during a football game. So if you don't understand American football, then that's fine, but you probably don't belong here anyway. Here's what I think is happening. If you watch a momentum shift, a major one. A lot of games have shifts in momentum, but I'm talking about a meltdown like my beloved Gators experience. I'm talking about when the wheels come off after you've been ahead. What actually happens? The dynamics of that are really interesting to me because, frankly, having happened to us twice now, blowing a 4-touchdown lead rather. The only explanation when you see this kind of a momentum shift, the only thing that makes any sense to you is that the team that was winning at halftime, blowing them out at halftime. The only thing that makes sense is that both teams went into the locker rooms and they switched jerseys and they came out in the other uniforms. And the people who played so well in the first half are now playing just as well in the second half. They're just wearing the other team's uniforms, and likewise for the losers. It is exactly like that. We're doing great. Look at these guys. They're awesome. They come out at halftime and it's like they switched uniforms. But here's what's interesting about momentum, and I think this applies to, I'm quite sure this applies to politics. So let's just say you're, just to run this analogy as far into the ground as I can, let's say that Hillary Clinton was up by 4 touchdowns. Let's say she was up by 3 touchdowns. A big lead, 3-touchdown lead at halftime, which maybe we'll say was the low point of Donald Trump 2 weeks ago. So all of a sudden, the underdog team scores a touchdown. Let's say she's up by 4 touchdowns, 28 points. And the underdogs somehow managed to score a touchdown. Now, what does that do? Well, the lead's not in danger. Now they're up still by 3. They're up by 21 points. The other team scored a touchdown. About time, hooray. But the fans of the underdog team that have been sitting in the stadium watching this massacre finally have something to cheer for. They don't think necessarily the game is going to be won because they haven't seen the momentum shift yet, but they have at least something to cheer for. After having the living snot beaten out of you by I could certainly testify to this because when I started at the Gators, we were 0-10. After watching your team getting pummeled, finally they do something right and they get some points, and now they're only down by 21 points, and you get to stand up and cheer, and there's something exciting at last. Now, you don't think that you're going to come back yet because the lead is still so dynamic, and likewise, the team that's ahead by 21 now says, okay, well, obviously they get a touchdown. It'd be nice to shut them out, but, touchdown's a touchdown. We're up by 3, so all we have to do. Here's where it gets interesting. So now the team that just scored the touchdown kicks off to the team that's up by 3 touchdowns, 21 points, and the team that's up by 21 points decides to say that, look, we've got such an enormous lead here. What we're going to do is we're just going to protect the lead. We're not going to do anything stupid. In other words, we're not going to do any of the things that got us the 28-point lead in the first place. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to go back and we're going to start playing very cautious football, up the middle punt. That was the University of Florida 1980 Gators chant, up the middle, punt, up the middle, punt, up the middle, punt. And that's what happens. So you're playing smart football. You think you're going to protect your lead. You get very conservative, pull everything in, and you go in 3 and out, and then you kick the ball back to the team that's under, and they run it back for a touchdown. Now, you're still up by 14 points. That's a sizable lead. It's getting late in the game. However, now for the first time, the underdog team sees a path. They see a pathway to victory. It's still not likely, but it's there. It wasn't there 10 minutes ago or 5 minutes ago. It's there. There's a pathway to victory there. And so they score the touchdown. They kick it back to the team that's ahead. And now the team that's ahead is getting very nervous. So they become more and more conservative. And once again, they don't do anything risky, don't do anything dangerous or interesting. The defense now of the team that's behind understands that. So they're not worried so much about the pass. They're just getting right on the line. They're just trying to make sure that they can stop these safe plays. That's exactly what they do. And then they have to kick it off back to the guys that are underneath it again, and they run it back for another touchdown, or they score a touchdown because now they're on fire. Now they're down by 7. All right, they're down by 7, but they've scored 3 unanswered touchdowns in a row. Time is running out. So the team that was down by 28 now gets the football to kick off to the team that was up. Now, the team that was up is in absolute meltdown mode. They know something absolutely dramatic and awful is happening, but they don't know how to stop it. They can see it happening in front of their eyes. And needless to say, all of the fans from the other side are screaming and yelling at the top of their lungs. You can just feel the electricity run through a place like that. You just feel it. So now in a last-ditch effort, when the time is getting low, the team that was down by 28 points decides that they're going to do an onside kick, which is extremely risky, doesn't usually work out. They do an onside kick to try and recover the football, bounces off the helmet of one of the guys of the team that used to be up. They recover the ball, and now they've got the ball back. And they throw for another touchdown, and now it's tied up. And now there's almost there's been, since the first 2 touchdowns, almost no way to stop them. See how it works? It doesn't make any sense that a team that is so good in the beginning should be so bad at the end. It just doesn't make sense, but it happens, and it happens enough so that you can see that it's an actual psychological phenomenon. It's an interaction that has to do with the team that's ahead, the team that's behind, especially the fans of the team that's behind, and secondarily the fans of the team that was ahead. And what happens is when you feel somebody coming back from what you sure is a sure defeat, when you can hear them catching up to you, you get nervous, you start playing conservative football. The other team's on fire. They've got nothing to lose. They've already given up the game. They know that the game is essentially unwinnable, so they're on fire. And they're sitting there. I've had this experience more times than I can count. You're sitting in a stadium looking at your shoes, getting the daylights knocked out of you, and something good happens, and now you're on, all right, woohoo, I at least get to cheer for one thing before I go home. Happens twice, it's like, wait a minute now. And then it happens 3 times. It's like, my God, we've got a chance to win this thing. When it happens 4 times, you're invincible. You can't be stopped. You just know it. And everything that team that used to be down is doing is working. Everything they're doing is working. Why? Because they're filled with confidence. They know the momentum's on their side. They know that this is something that they're going to be able to. They know they're going to win. And sure enough, they're playing loose and confident. And the team that was up by 4 touchdowns they're stunned. It's like a duck hit on the head, just wandering around. They don't have any idea what's happening. You can see it on their faces, on the faces of the coaches. It's like there's something bigger than us has taken control of this game, and we have no control over it. And in a sense, that's exactly what happened. Something bigger did take control of this game, and what happened was you saw this weird kind of a tilt. A tipping point of confidence, and you watch it happen in real time. It doesn't take long. You can see the whole thing in 15 minutes usually. There's a tipping point in confidence where the first touchdown for the losers, I mean, it's just about to slide off the table for the winners, and then the guys that were ahead, and then the underdogs come back and maybe I won't go to the car just yet. And as this thing continues to go, there comes a point when everything just slides, and it just goes completely the other way. And the team that was ahead plays so conservatively that they don't get any yards, forget any more points. And the team that used to be behind has nothing to lose. They're confident, they're loose, and they're scoring at will. Now, that's what it looks like to me today. It looks like to me today, at this instant, as we record this on November 2nd in the evening, 2016, it looks to me like the underdog team, Donald Trump, has now tied the score. That it's now we're now 35-35 or whatever the score is. We've scored 4 unanswered touchdowns, and we got the ball. So I don't know. Momentum is an amazing thing. It happened in 1980 with Reagan, where at the very end, Reagan was climbing slowly, was gaining, but Mondale had a gigantic lead, and then all of a sudden everything just broke. And the wheels came off for the former leader, and the underdogs are energized to a level that they've never ever felt before. Now, at 608 said, I heard this before in 2012. Listen, Ats, if anybody is tired of praying for polling anomalies, it's me. And because Trump has more enthusiasm doesn't necessarily mean anything. It basically, if you think that the team with the most enthusiasm wins, you can ask, President Ron Paul or President Bernie Sanders how that worked out. However, the team that had the most enthusiasm has won the last 3 in a row, and that would be the Trump, us. Hillary Clinton is looking terrified. The press is looking terrified. They're doing all the things that a team that it used to be ahead does to absolutely ensure that they lose the game. They're not doing the things that they were doing when they were winning. Now they do nothing but just pull in tight and make mistakes and just hope that the clock can run out before they get there. And man alive, I'll tell you, I just posted it on YouTube and on BillWhittle.com. It'll be up on Facebook in the morning. I'm sorry, it's Carter in 1980. Sorry about that, guys. It was Carter. The Donald Trump that I saw at Grand Rapids in a couple days ago, Grand Rapids, Michigan. I didn't know he was on. I don't usually watch these speeches, but he was on live on Facebook, and I just caught it. And he is not the candidate that started this general election. He's not the candidate of the conventions. He's certainly not the candidate of the primaries. This guy is much, much, much better than the Donald Trump that came out of the convention and that we saw through debates 1 and number 2. Even in the first part of debate 1, where he was pummeling her, he was so out of control. It was so, I don't want to say adolescent, but it was adolescent. But at least we were hitting some points, right? I mean, he was landing some, and we're cheering. Then she insults his money, and he spends the rest of the debate number 1 defending his money, and I don't even have any idea what debate number 2 was. However, in debate number 3, he was not the same guy. I went in there basically, look, you have to be realistic, right? I'm going to vote for Trump. I don't care what the polls say. And needless to say, I'm going to do that anyway. But by the time we got to debate number 3, it really looked like this was just, if Trump makes the slightest mistake, it's over. However, he didn't. He was much, much more disciplined than he had been. He was much better informed than he used to be, but he was still getting those punches in there. So my right angle for the week is talking about his messaging in Grand Rapids. And I mean, he was just fantastic. He was saying, it's time for a new deal for Black America. What? I like to consider myself a messaging guy. When you say it's time for a new deal for Black America, what are you really saying? You're stealing Hillary Clinton's entire weaponry. You're not just taking an arrow out of her quiver. You're taking her entire quiver and her bow and her sword and her shield, and you're punking her on the nose as well on the way out. And when you say you're going to make a new deal for Black America, then what that basically is saying is, I am going to be more of everything that the Democrats have told you was good for you, this giant state socialism, well, it hasn't worked, so you're going to get a new deal. Brilliant. He had a couple of, because you'd be in jail line was great. Brilliant move. He said, some of these things are kind of trite, and I'm sure he didn't come up with them. Doesn't matter. He doesn't have to come up with them. But when he said, used to be that we made cars in Flint and you couldn't drink the water in Mexico. Now they make cars in Mexico and you can't drink the water in Flint. That is profoundly superb messaging, because even though it sounds a little bit trite, everybody in their gut knows it's true. They know it's true. And that is exactly what's been happening. He was pounding on jobs. He was hitting with how corrupt Hillary was. He did not get off on tangents. He did not fall for the bait. He didn't go wandering off into this wonderful club that he's established down in the Caribbean. Nothing. He was just pounding her on jobs, national security, recklessness, and so on. And he sounded like hope. He was also, for the first time ever, Hillary Clinton will talk about, moving forward, but that's all they ever talk about, these regressives. That's all they ever talk about is, we have to move forward. We have to move forward into slavery. We used to be a free country, but now we're going to move forward into slavery. Forward. We're progressives. We have to move forward. We can't go backwards. We have to move forward. Okay. Well, it's obviously done some good. However, Trump was talking about things like, when he said we are 8 days away from the change you've been waiting all your lives for, oh my God. That's the highest form of warfare. Sun Tzu talked about this. He called it swordlessness. It's where you walk into the enemy's camp without any weapons, and you kill them with their weapons. You take their weapons from them, and then you kill them. My God, it was brilliant. So I feel like we have got a big fourth quarter rally. I know the time is very short, but I feel like we got the ball. And I think that Hillary Clinton is melting down. She was shouting at a Bill Clinton is a rapist protester. That alone is kind of fun to watch. But she really uncorked on the guy. And needless to say, all of her supporters cheered her to the point where you couldn't hear her anymore. But, when you acknowledge it, Hillary, you're acknowledging it. And she didn't do it well, I didn't think. She looked nuts. And the worst of it was after she attacked this heckler, she kind of tried to go right back into her speech, and she's got no feel for the moment at all. She's got no feel for the moment. She's got no sense of people and genuine emotions and feelings, because that was the time to improvise and just slaughter them. They're people are, again, it's a football analogy. They're in this. They're standing up cheering at Hillary responding to this Bill Clinton is a rapist guy. And instead of driving the point home, instead of just riding that wave, see, this is what they do to us. This is what they've always done to us. They're always trying to, it's all about sex. It's all about this. It's all about male dominance. It's all about that. Just go home, run it. But no. She gave a little bit of a response. The crowd went crazy. And in the middle of the applause, as people were still screaming and cheering, she says, and that's why we must, in the interest of move the country forward, not backward. We're moving forward, not backward. And it's like, Jesus Christ, it looks just pathetic. So our worst case scenario has improved enormously since this last episode. Really, it's improved enormously since last month. I was convinced that because of the media protection, everything comes down to the media. It's all the media, all of it. Clinton, Obama, all of it. The Justice Department, if there was a newspaper, if there was a media, we wouldn't have this problem. But this was the plan of the Frankfurt School, was to basically the long march through our social institutions, starting with journalism. And there's not a single journalist out there, with the exception of Cheryl Atkinson and one or two others, Chris Matthews and that other awesome guy, I forget his name. In any event, she couldn't call an audible, Matt says. That's exactly right. That's exactly it, Matt. If we're going to run this thing to the ground, let's run it into the ground. She couldn't call an audible. She couldn't read a hole in the defense that was as wide as a truck, and just couldn't take advantage and go through the opportunity. She went right back to the script and so on. So the momentum is definitely with Trump. And I thought the press is 100% behind the Democrats. It's not even slanted now. And it's not even press anymore. It is a machine. It's a publicity machine. That's the best way to think of it. The mainstream media is like a publicity firm that the Democrats have hired, and it's a hell of a firm. They got radio covered. They got late night TV. They got comedy. They got the pop culture. They got movie stars showing up to endorse their product. They've got the New York Times and NBC, ABC, the whole thing, CNN. They got all of it. It's a tremendous PR firm, and that's what it is. It's a PR firm. It's not the news anymore. It's a PR firm. So I thought this PR firm is so powerful that the truth will never get out there. And whether Comey was a good guy, forget about before he reopened the investigation, and even today, whether Comey was a good guy or a bad guy, I realized after July, doesn't even matter, because he knew that the Justice Department wasn't going to prosecute the case. And they did their calculations, as they always do, and they knew that 30%, 40% of the country knows that they're a bunch of liars and thieves and knows about all this stuff, but they don't care. They don't care unless it's 50% of the country or 51% of the country. I just have to take advantage of this. Ad 608 says, I'd rather vote for an Egg McMuffin than Hillary or Trump. Well, you're going to love my next firewall, ATS 608, because the name of the next firewall is Hillary Clinton versus a turnip. And I'm basically going to compare the advantages of Hillary Clinton as president versus a turnip as president. And I think by the time I'm done, you'll be ready to vote turnip. And it's not a play on Trump. It's an actual turnip. There you go. So anyway, it's actually starting to look like it may come down, that there are people in the government who still respect the law and respect the honesty and understand how this country works. So if this is in fact what's happening, I was very hard on FBI agents for not doing anything. I thought they should have I thought if you worked for the FBI or any of the intelligence agencies, if you knew the evidence and you saw what was happening, I thought it was your moral obligation to resign. But they were more effective than that. My hope, just because I'm an emotional guy who's been in this fight for a while, is my hope is that I get to see the wheels come off for the next 4 or 5 days, the way that Tennessee got to watch our wheels come off. We beat the living stuffing out of them. I was at 8, 9, 10 years in a row. And I know what that feeling is like. I saw us beat Florida State in the Sugar Bowl, and I just want to watch the wheels come off of Hillary Clinton. I want to watch the Hindenburg go down in flames. And really, the best analogy is it's not even the Hindenburg. I would like to see. Oh boy, hang on a second. I'm sorry. I'm trying to figure out, I've got a little bit of a problem here. I hate to break this up in the middle of something. I've got somebody who I need to get picked up on Uber, and the car didn't show up. And it's probably because I was busy in the middle of this, yeah. Oh, for God's sake. I'm sorry about this, folks. This is a actual kind of I don't want to call it an emergency, but it is. Oh, this is so bloody annoying. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I apologize for the dead air. I'll try and cut it out for the YouTube version. It's just something I have to take care of. So if you just, I'm going to need just a minute or two. And usually, of course, is the first time I've ever had a real Uber failure. So if you'll excuse me for 1 minute, I'm genuinely sorry. So I'll go through this as fast as I can. Talk amongst yourselves here. And if you're on YouTube, just fast forward. Let's see here. Mm-hmm. Almost there. I'm so sorry about this. I really am. I've never had a problem with this before. I had the Uber kind of preloaded, ready to go, hit a button, and bam. There we go. Two more things to do. You have no idea how excruciating this is. Really, it's just excruciating. God, I'm just dying here. I'm dying. Thank God for editing. Okay. It's on its way. Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Clavin would have sorted this out. You're absolutely right, Richard Duke. Clavin would have sorted it out. Clavin would have had an answer. He wouldn't have just left things hanging there the way I do. That rascal. So anyway, I think it's probably enough of the opening comments. So let's get going because we have got a lot of great questions today, and about 33 minutes in. Okay, I'm going to try and make these answers shorter, which means they'll come out a lot longer. Here we go. Dave Olson is back, and he's got the number one rated question because I loved it so much we talked about it on Facebook Live. And Dave Olson says, strange women lying in ponds distributing swords is starting to look like a pretty good basis for a system of government. How do we fix the process? And I'm not talking about specific policy here that selected these two. Okay, 4, all right, 8 knuckleheads, counting the Veeps. Upon further reflection, make it 7. Pence seems to be a decent chap. In other words, is this system the system that we need? And somebody demands to see the shirt. Sorry, I gotta ban. It's Washington leading his slaves to his plantation. I think that's what the painting is called. Okay, so I think there may be another one like this. Look, the system works just great. If there's a press, it's required. There are always people that want there are always unscrupulous people who cheat and who want power and money, and they can do it through manipulating elections, and they will do it every time. And the only way that that you can stop this is by prying into it and looking inside. This is, I think that the Clinton thing, I suspect, I really do, is going to be even bigger than Teapot Dome scandal with Boss Tweed and all the rest in New York City. I just do think so. Except this time it's not going to be the press, Dave. It's going to be the new press, which is basically us. I have like I said, I've got a big video coming out on November 9th in a whole new direction, and I am going to. I'll tell you one of these, Dave. One of the 5 points. It's going to take 40 years to get this country's moral tone back. But point number 3 is we have got to understand that as long as the progressives control the media, we will not win elections. This is a fluky year. The American people have had enough. That's great, but the damage to the institutions continues, and there's certainly no guarantee that Trump's going to win this thing. So, one of the 5 points, point number 3, is this: we need to understand this in our bones. We cannot change the mainstream media. It will not happen. Even if we started today with journalism students, we couldn't change the mainstream media in time, because by the time those people graduated in 15, 20 years, there will be no mainstream media. That's the good news. The good news is we don't have to destroy them. Economics are destroying them. They're being destroyed economically. They are going out of business. New York Times had a 97% fall off in revenues. Newsweek magazine, remember that? Sold for $1, overcharged in my opinion. All of the networks, nobody's watching TV anymore. Now, obviously a lot of people still are. I'm one of these weird guys that was born just at exactly the right time, where I think if I'd been born 6 months later, I would have missed the computer revolution, but I didn't. So all I do is watch TV on the internet now. I watch Hulu and I watch Apple TV, and more and more and more I just watch YouTube videos, because it's where the talent is in many cases. And that's where a lot of my interests are. So the mainstream media is going away. It used to be that if you had ABC, NBC, or CBS, you owned the entire country. And then Walter Cronkite could say that Vietnam is a lost cause, and it's automatically a lost cause, and no one's going to know any different. Even if you thought it wasn't a lost cause, you're going to be feeling like you're all alone. Then there were, 5 different networks, and then there were 19 different networks, and now there are millions of different networks. So I think the perfect example for what we have to do as point number 3 in terms of the information, making actual information available to the American people. I think the best example of this is the footage of Hillary misstepping into the car at the 9/11 memorial. Hey, there we go. We all remember that footage where the woman is clearly very, very, very ill, and she's being held up by the arms. The black van arrives. They open the doors, and her legs just give out, and she's literally held by the arms and basically pitched into this her Secret Service van. Now the press, the mainstream press, was recording this as a misstep. She stumbled getting into the car, and frankly, even 4 or 5 years ago, that would have been the story. But this is you guys got to listen to this, because I think is probably the most all 5 of my points are pretty damn profound, if I do say so myself. But the bad news is that they own all of these institutions. The good news is those institutions are irrelevant, becoming more irrelevant every day. The reason that we saw Hillary Clinton stumble, basically collapse, is not because of the news media. The reason we saw Hillary Clinton collapse into that van was because 2 citizens were walking around, and so do another 200 million of us, walking around with high-definition television cameras in our pocket. Think about that for a second. HD TV in the pocket of 150, 200 million Americans? This is high-definition television right there. It's HD TV, and the newer ones are even super HD. So this is capable of recording the information, right? And the quality of the cameras and their low light quality means that what would happen before? Let's say something happened before there was an event. Let's say there was a riot, even 5 years ago. Basically, what happens? Well, there's news that there's a riot. The reports get called into the television station. The television station has the van run over there. They run up that gigantic mast. They set up this big light, and they've got this gigantic camera on their shoulder, and then some idiot in a suit comes out with a microphone and starts saying, there appears to be a riot in downtown Los Angeles today. Now, the instant that there's a riot, it's not only just shot and uploaded to YouTube. Now it is Facebook Live. It's just, here's my camera, and I'm talking to the entire world in real time with a 5-second delay. That is what we've always wanted. I've said it 1,000 times. I do not want a conservative media. If we had a conservative media, we'd make the same mistakes that they do. We'd fall victim to the same temptations and the same corruption. I want a fair media. So here's the thing. The way to look at the new media is the way to look at it is it's kind of the Uber of media. The genius of Uber, the genius of it, was not that they said, hey, you know what, people are frustrated with cabs because they're too expensive, they take too long, and drivers are too rude. Therefore, we need to buy 200 million automobiles and set up an entire series of drivers for this. That wasn't the genius of them. The genius, the simple genius of Uber is, I've got money, you've got a car, why don't you take me where I'm going and I'll pay you? Ta-da. $60 billion is what that company's worth. Now they're worth every penny of it. So think of it as kind of the Uber of the news media. We now have citizens. Citizens are walking around with what used to be entire news vans, including probably better commentary. If people would just learn, instead of doing this, folks, just, if you could just do that, life would be so much better for all the rest of us old school guys. And you get a lot more information in the shot too. But other than that, it's the Uber revolution. Every citizen is a journalist now. And what we have to do as conservatives is we have to widen up the sharing network. We have to, which is getting done pretty much through Facebook anyway and so on, but it'd be nice to have see, everything I'm thinking about for this new plan it just runs up against the rocks of old-fashioned thinking. It's not that we need a website, we don't need a clearing center, we don't need any of that. The thing has to be completely headless. It's got to be absolutely horizontally organized, not vertically organized at all. It's got to be essentially just a sea of nodes that make their own connections, and I'm not going to get into that again. But basically, every day that goes by, the mainstream news media becomes more ossified and just smaller reach, really. Doesn't matter how poisonous they are politically, they're just getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and the ad revenues are down everywhere. And conversely, the ability of a private citizen to report on something and have it seen by the entire world is here. So this is going to mostly take care of itself, but we have to understand it. Oh, there's a critical point to this point number 3. And this is something that most older people don't understand. In fact, as I said, I'm just a freak with formerly too much time on my hands, and I keep my ear very close to the ground in terms of what young people are doing and saying. I don't try to, I don't want to lay down the fat beats with them or anything. However, it's still critically important, what I'm about to say. There's a slang that goes out on Facebook and texting and Instagram and all that, and it's very important, and we need to understand it. If we're 100 years old, you still need to understand this. In the world today, you may not like it, and I don't, but nevertheless, this is the truth of the world today, and it is very simple. It is pix or it didn't happen. Pix or it didn't happen. This is a kind of a snappy way to say that if you're bragging about something on the internet, show me some pictures or else it didn't happen. As far as I'm concerned, you're just making it up. Pix or it didn't happen is what is the standard for information and news today. Pix or it didn't happen. And I can be very clear about this. if we had pictures of Hillary Clinton stumbling into that van. If somebody had said, I saw her collapse and fall into the van, does anybody think that story would have gone anywhere? Anywhere? No. Conversely, if Donald Trump had not had that audio, if there was a transcript of Donald Trump saying what he said that got him into so much trouble a couple of weeks ago, if that had been a transcript, Trump, if that had been a transcript, it wouldn't have had any effect at all. None. Nobody would have read it. Nobody's got the time. But most importantly, we are so used to having pictures and words associated with our news now that a transcript simply doesn't matter. I'm not saying that people wouldn't believe it was true because of the transcript. I'm just saying nobody would watch it. You can't put a transcript on the air and grab people's attention. But when you hear Donald Trump's voice saying that, you have my attention. When you have Hillary Clinton on camera collapsing, you've got my attention. So it's pics or it didn't happen. And if we don't understand that, then we're gonna be in big old trouble. So this is one of the many things I feel like I have to really just hammer. Is that there's 200 million people out there with high definition cameras, and it's got to be visually recorded. By the way, the clear example, obviously, is McKeith and his Acorn videos. No one would have believed that this was true. And then he showed the pictures. And then they said, well, that's only one office. Then he showed another office. He said, well, that's only black people. Then he showed a white person doing it. He had the pictures. You cannot argue with the pictures. You cannot. There's no argument to it. When you see somebody on camera taking a bribe and saying, thank you, I have this done, it is incontrovertible evidence. Bill Clinton is not in jail because there's no pictures of him doing what he did. And the same for Hillary. There's no pictures of it. I happen to believe there are pictures of it. I just don't think they're available to the people. I just think they're internal home movies and that kind of thing. In any event, it is a new world, and we have to understand it, and we have to get ahead of this wave and use it rather than fight it. The mainstream media is not going to change. It's never going to change. Give it up. James O'Keefe is the future, and those two people that took those pictures of Hillary Clinton are the future. And parenthetically, in a very poignant sort of way, can you imagine what 9/11 would have been like if it happened 5-6 years later? I mean, we saw footage from, I don't know, the second tower, maybe there's 7, 8, 9, 10 different angles of this that are of high quality. If that attack had happened 4, 5, 6 years later, there would have been 60,000 videos of this happening. It would have been from every angle. It would have been from every, it just would have been amazing. So it's a different world. That helps us. And you can't force these things. That's good news. Okay, Brent D. Cates, our friend Brent, says, Hillary's only hope is vote fraud now. Trump surging, investigation reopened. What can we do as so many voter ID laws are overturned and poll-watching organizations are being sued by the DNC? Will Hillary steal this election? That's the operative sentence there. I've talked with people who seem to know a little bit about this. They say that they can probably, if they really, really go to the wall, pull 1 or 2 percentage points on a national level. And of course, they don't have to do it on a national level. This is one of the reasons that voter fraud is more insidious than it appears. They don't need to have voter fraud in California, and they don't need to have voter fraud in Utah. They need to have voter fraud in Florida and Pennsylvania and Ohio and places like that, Nevada. There's no question that it's endemic. There's no question that it is one way. No one has ever seen these polling machines switch from the Democrat to the Republican. No one has ever seen dead people registering Republican. One of my favorite jokes in the entire world. I just love it so much. And I use it every chance I get at a speaking event. And it's basically this, my dad was, my dad voted Republican until the day he died. And then he started voting Democrat. So it's there. Can she steal the election? She could steal it if it's close, but I don't think it's going to be close. You cannot steal a national election that's not really razor thin. It seems that you could, but it doesn't really matter. On a national level, I'm not saying it doesn't matter. It obviously does matter. But on a national level with so many precincts and so many observers, in order to influence a national election, even statewide election, it is, very difficult. That doesn't mean they don't try. And obviously, they're putting the pressure on the fulcrum. And this is part of, once again, if there was a news media, they wouldn't be able to get away with it, but there isn't, so they do. I think, Brent, one way or another, it's going to be a sizable win for one or the other, a non-cheatable win. I don't think it's going to be 2000. I think it's going to be bigger than we thought, one way or another. Matt Hindeland asks, what is the best way to choose our future presidents? Popular vote, electoral college, a combination, or something completely different? Instant runoff, ranked choice, and so on. A lot of people have argued for ranked choice, which is where you fill out a ballot, and it's kind of, here's my first choice, then my second, third, fourth, and fifth, and strange things can happen where nobody's first choice wins in the second and third choice. I saw them do this in Australia. And then people say it helps outliers, people who are not so much in Republican or Democrat. I think that's the problem with it. The two-party system has, at least historically, taken radical viewpoints on the left and the right and folded them into something that has to be palpable to the middle. They've de-radicalized the left, and they've de-reactionized the right. Because there's only two parties, you have to basically steer to the middle. You run to your right or your left in the primaries, but for the general election, you've got to make whatever ideas you have acceptable to the American people. So the fact that the idea of America with 7 political parties with the same kind of system as a parliamentary system is just, it's unimaginable to me. I do categorically think that we are well past the time of Republicans and Democrats. I think these two parties are obsolete. I think that there are a lot of people who have relatively conservative viewpoints and simply can't imagine the idea of voting Republican or Democrat or whatever. But I think if you were to take the red box and the blue box, dump all the people on the table, you probably could come up with a party that would appeal to 80% of them or so. So the answer is the Electoral College, and very, very briefly, the Electoral College is critical. Progressives talk about the Electoral College as if it's kind of an appendix that needs to be removed. Of course they say that. The Electoral College is here for one reason, and it is, in fact, an appendix. It's a vestigial remains of back when states had rights before they lost the Senate influence in the 17th Amendment. But if you want to explain it to people who have a little bit of a cognitive problem, the best way I found to do it is this. The United States of America is not really a country. I mean, it's certainly a nation, but it's not one homogenous nation. It's not like Scandinavia or Sweden or anything. The United States is at least 6 or 7 individual cultures, and they're very different. And a president has to appeal to New England Yankees, and he has to appeal to the Deep South. He has to appeal to the little Creole pocket down there in Louisiana. He has to appeal to the Southwest Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada desert dwellers. He's got to deal with the hippy-dippy Pacific Northwest. He's got the entire Midwest of decent, hardworking people there. You've got all these different tribes mixed up, and you've got to appeal to all of them. So the reason the Democrats want to get rid of the Electoral College and go straight to a popular vote is if the people elect the president, then all the president has to do is campaign in New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, San Francisco, Dallas. Just go into the cities. Go into the cities, and you'll win because that's where the population is. You look at these election maps by state, and you can see that the middle of the country is pretty red. But if you look at it by county, the entire center of the country is essentially just ocean of red with blue stripes down the coast. And those blue stripes have a much higher population density than the red areas. And so basically, if you go to a popular vote, all you have to do is appeal to city people's needs and problems. You don't have to deal with anything in flyover country. You just simply tailor your audience so that you're talking about more mass transit and more public health care and all the rest of this stuff. And it doesn't matter what the people in flyover country think. But the way the system is rigged now, when I say rigged, I mean assembled, you have to be able to win a majority of the states. You have to go all around the country. And the thing that is most appalling to me, I mean, I think the system's very fair, and actually think it's kind of brilliant. But what I can't stand is that California is 54 electoral votes. It's nearly a fifth, more than a fifth of probably of the way to get to the presidency. A fifth. And if you start the election 20% of the way, and then you throw in New York City and a couple of others like Illinois, the Democrats start out 80%, 85% of the way, something like that. Now, people leave California, go to Texas. That's good. Texas is growing. It's number 2 in terms of electoral votes. I was shocked to see how much more it had than New York now. But Texas is getting a little pinker, frankly. And anyway, the idea is you've got to disperse the presidential appeal. You have to make the president appeal to a lot more people, and so that you have to win by the states. So anyway, there you go. Dan Fendel has a practical question. Bill, as a member, I love the fact that more people are paying attention and supporting the cause thanks to the election season, but how do we keep the momentum and membership growing once the bloom is off this pumpkin? Dan, that is a profoundly good question, and one I've been struggling with for 6 months now, and suddenly, I think about 3 weeks ago now, I suddenly realized that I had this exactly wrong. I had thought, I mean, I'm just speaking to you honestly here as a business owner, and thank you for your membership, by the way. I had thought that obviously election mania means it's going to be good time for political pundits, and after the election, people don't want anything to do with politics. That was certainly the case in 2012. I thought the virtual presidency stuff was some of the best stuff I did, writing-wise, and certainly production-wise. It was the best stuff I did. But it was also the most, by far, the least popular in terms of views. And I think it's because it started coming out in February of 2013, and Obama had just been inaugurated. So we did a virtual inauguration. I think people were just disgusted and sick of it, and they don't want anything to do with the politics. I have come to think, however, the exact inverse is true. I keep talking about this November 9th video. It's going to be an interesting video, because I'm going to be making the case for the November 9th world. Now, if Hillary wins, that's a different world than if Trump wins, but it's still the same problem. It's still the same problem. The problem is, folks, and most people don't want to hear it, but here it is. The reason we have such terrible politicians and candidates is because the quality of the American people has fallen so dramatically. The country elects people, and then they hold them accountable. And if the politicians are as corrupt as they are, and if the media is as corrupt as it is, it reflects an underlying corruption of the American people's moral values. It's just the truth. The way we get better government is by getting better people. Now, you may argue that half of the people are better than the other half in terms of morals. I think that's absolutely true. But the problem is that we are getting smaller and they are getting bigger. And so on November 9th, basically what I want to do is I want to basically say, listen, we have to start a 40-year plan to recover this country the way that it was taken away. We have to recover it the way it was taken away. We got to get down and just bow our heads in respect and admiration. Well, not respect, but admiration of what the progressives have done. They did it. They took the most free country in the world and they turned it into a socialist kleptocracy, which is infuriating. But we got to get it back. Now, we can't people want to say, well, if we had a better candidate or if we had a different party, all of this is part of the mix. If we had this, if we had that, that's fine. But that's not the problem. The problem is that half of the country is ready to vote for an obvious felon. The problem is that kids, I've been doing more young people lately. I think I'll have some video of the last one I did for 850 people, young people. They were about 9-1 Democrats. And I got those people thinking. I mean, it was raucous. There was shouting back and forth. It wasn't screaming or nasty, but it was high energy and intensity. They've never heard these ideas. So we have got to get the American people reacquainted with their system of government. And that's exactly, and Chase Lounge says we have to do that no matter who wins. That's precisely correct. Now, the way I box this thing will be different depending on whether Hillary or Trump wins. If Hillary wins, then it will be, listen, we know we're in deep trouble, and we need to start. We don't need to start at the top. We need to rebuild the foundations of this building, and it's going to take a while. We have to get into pop culture. We have to start appealing to young people. I mean, 15, 16, 17-year-old people. People are going to vote next time. We got to look for a different kind of politician. We have to talked about the media run around. We have to get into pop culture, and we have to understand that the progressives have causes that are continuing to get them votes, and we need to have a plan for those causes. We need to have an option for the people that are rioting in the streets of Ferguson. It's repugnant to us because we see nothing but crime and ignorance and violence and all the rest of it. And that's true, but it is also true that this is our country. These cities that are burning down with riots over a phenomenon that doesn't exist, that was created by the progressives and backed by the president and the attorney general. We don't like it, and we've walked away from it, and we are very happy to turn our back on it. But the fact is, we've allowed our cities to become war zones, and I mean like Syria-level war zones in terms of casualties. So we have to understand that the reason progressives win is because they have social causes to crow about and to cover up their power grab by saying this is for the poor, the weak, or the gay, or the whatever. We have to have a solution to those problems. The solution is always the same. It's always less government, but we've got to be able to simply explain that. We have to make it clear why. We have to give people in inner cities an understanding that they can live better than they do, because anything's going to be better than the way they live now. And we need to be able to go in here. It's the most important thing about recovering this country. We've been saying what we're against for 8 years because so much has been going wrong, so much has been going off the cliff. We do simply say, no, stop, we got to stop it here. So that's appropriate. But we've never really said what we're for. We've never really made the case for small government. We've made the case against government. We make the case against big government, but we never make the case for small government. We never do. The reason I think this is going to be so interesting for me on November 9th, and the reason I feel Dan, the reason that I feel that it's going to be such an important day, I'm really beginning to think that everything I've done with my life, including the 8 years of videos and 12 years of writing, all of it, the time I spent broke, the time I spent as a lot more liberal than I am, I'm really starting to think that all of this stuff is coming together, and that on November 9th will actually be the beginning of me getting to be what I'm actually really good at. We have to be able to synthesize these two things. We have to be able to bring the country back together and understand that the reason we're getting such horrible politicians is because the American people are at war with each other, and we can't stay at war with each other. We can't. We're already talking about civil war. We're talking about Texas seceding, and I'm thinking, man, sign me up. I'm going to Texas. That is not the optimal solution, right? We do have enormous advantages for us. First of all, unlike the progressives in 1960, who were a microscopic, late 50s, the communists, microscopic percentage of the population. They took 40 years to walk through colleges and journalism schools and all the rest. We're starting with about 50% of the country, one way or another. So we've got a much bigger head start. Go back. We're going to be the football episode. It's like the difference between they basically got the football kickoff and basically got tackled on the 1 yard line. They got 99 yards to go, and we basically ran it back to the 50. So we got much better field position than they do. Dan, that's actually very important because we don't have to move the ball all the way. We just have to get it over the 50 point, and then elections start swinging our way. So if Hillary wins, we're going to say this is America's last chance. We've got to get these things in place, and we've got to start with the fundamentals, even though the time is late. We've got to start with the fundamentals because we're getting smaller. If Trump wins, we have the same problem, but we have to package it. I have to package it slightly differently. First of all, I'll be overjoyed. But most importantly, I think the way I'll package it is that the great danger of a Trump win is that we go, woohoo, Trump wins. and we stop being aware of the damage that's been done to this country. We say, well, Trump's in there and then Trump's going to clean it out. No, I'm not saying that Trump won't do things to clean it up at the top, but this doesn't come from the top. It has to come from the bottom. It has to come from the bottom. We have to understand that we have to reintroduce the people to America and what it means. And if Trump wins, I will say, folks, we're bleeding out on the street. This is Cheryl Toomey's line, and I'm eternally grateful, Cheryl. It's a tremendous analogy. I've used it a couple times already, and somebody credited it to me without saying that it wasn't my line. It's Cheryl Toomey's line, but really, I think it's exactly right. If Trump wins, it's a tourniquet. He's a tourniquet. He's not the answer, I don't think. I don't think he's the guy to rebuild these institutions. But for God's sakes, he is certainly the guy to stop the bleeding. He is the guy who can stop the bleeding. And if that's the case, then we have to be able to say, okay, we've got a little window of opportunity here, folks. Absolutely window of opportunity. And we have to move now. You know, we're on the street. We've got a tourniquet on our leg. We're not about to die in the next 30 seconds like we were just as a moment ago. But we cannot just lie on the street with our femoral artery ruptured and just go for another 4 years assuming things will be fine. No. We got to understand it's an emergency, and we have to move now. And we've been given a break, you know, by the grace of God and the wisdom of the American people and some patriotism in the FBI. We've been given a reprieve, and if we do not move into that reprieve, then we will get what we deserve. And then it's going to be up to people like us, people like me, to reintroduce Americans to America. And when I talk about going for the middle, I know a lot of conservatives get very upset. Sometimes they get furious about that. You're going soft on us, Bill. No, it's just the opposite. It's the exact opposite of that. I don't want to move towards the middle. I want the middle to move towards us. I want this giant center of the country that is fundamentally fair, fundamentally decent, wants to do some good, wants to see things happen, doesn't want to live in a society with poor people or violence to this level. You can actually get these people to become what we would today call conservatives by keeping the platform small and making it clear that the answer to everything in the world is essentially a form of well-regulated competition where nobody gets to cheat. And somebody has to make that case. Now, the bigger story here is this. We're watching it happen now. People are calling this politics is downstream of culture. Exactly. Fuzzy logic is Andrew Breitbart's line. It's absolutely true. We have two macro problems. The major problem, we've got big problems: education, media, pop culture, and politicians, all the rest. There are two macro problems. One of them is, how do I put this? The macro problem that we have, really, I guess, is the most important one, is this. We have got to figure out how to convince the average American, especially young Americans, why a moral life is happier and more fulfilling than a sinful one. And that is going to be really tough, because sin is fun, and it's very, very compelling and very, very attractive. When especially if you're a young person, if you're talking about, this kind of sexualization of society and basically do-it-yourself morals that, I'll do whatever I want to, and relative morality, and you do all the drugs you want to and party all the way through college and all the rest of it. If it weren't fun, people wouldn't be doing it. Now, a lot of people think you have to lead this with religion, and I completely disagree. I think it's just the exact opposite. I think if you go to the American people saying that Jesus is the answer, you're going to lose before you get out of the gate. They don't want to hear that because they've heard that a million times. Now, just so you know that I'm not talking about giving up our values, I personally think if you can find a way to convince people that life is better if you're a fundamentally good person, then I think religion will follow that rather than lead it. I think people will become more religious as they become more moral. But, it's really not hard to do. It just hasn't been done. You can look at these people that have everything. Some of these movie producers, like Don Simpson, I remember particularly well. Simpson, partner of Bruckheimer, he was just a hollow shell of a guy. All he wanted was money, power, fame, and women, and he got all of them. And he just finally couldn't take it. How many people think that the children of movie stars are happy, well-adjusted people, or of very rich people? There's very few rich people's children that are any good at all. And that's not saying that poverty is great, but it's saying that getting everything you want all the time is, in fact, the most is the most horrible thing that can happen to you, because you'll never understand what achievement is. And it's really important. Now, how do you sell that to a country that progressively every day is more coarsened by Miley Cyrus and Kanye West and all the rest? And that's just the tip of the spear. How do you sell that to an American people whose comics are nothing but cynics, who do nothing but mock these ideas that are worthy of being noble? We were talking about this. I don't know. Someone might have been backstage on Right Angle. Back in Britain, I think a little while ago, they had a contest to name this new. I think it was a ship for the Royal Navy, and they thought we'll have an online competition, and we'll figure out what the people want to hear. For this new vessel in the Royal Navy. So they had this online competition, and the name that won in a runaway runout was Bodie McBoatface. HMS Bodie McBoatface. Now, when I heard that, I laughed and I thought it was funny. However, what does that say? You wouldn't have heard that from people in the 1960s, the American people in the 1960s trying to come up with a name for the first moon landing vehicle. We went with, Columbia and Eagle. We didn't come up with, Spacey McSpaceface. We were able to be more serious about that. I think that people have been so disappointed for so long that cynicism is a defense mechanism against disappointment, right? I mean, cynicism is a defense mechanism against disappointment, because if you're already disappointed, if you're already convinced that nothing good's going to happen, then you don't have to go through the crushing disappointment of finding that out. John Condon says corrosive. That's exactly the word. It is the only word you need to apply to this culture. It's corrosive. It is eating away not just our moral foundations, but everything that follows. The institutions are falling apart. We keep thinking, what do we have to do to repair the institutions? And the answer is not. We don't repair the institutions. We have to repair the people that go into the institutions. We have to repair the people that are voting for these people. The institutions, at least as written, the Constitution as written, is perfect. It's perfect. Get rid of the 17th Amendment and the 16th Amendment, basically some minor tweaking, which is just undoing things that were tacked on later, by the way. Just take the Constitution as written. As a matter of fact, take the Constitution, make an 11th Amendment that says that voting is applicable to everybody, make a 12th Amendment that says private property should not be violated, and that's all you need. And just chuck the rest of it, keep the original Constitution word for word, and then the Bill of Rights +2. The problem is that these people do the most astonishingly bald-faced manipulation of what's written on the page in the Constitution. Clinton's a perfect example of this. I keep coming to these two statutes. It's federal law. The federal law basically says if you do not turn in all of your records as a government employee, that is a felony. And it further says if you attempt to tamper with or destroy any of those records, that is a second felony, and that second felony is punishable by, in addition to the punishment, disqualifies you from any office in the United States government. It's supposed to. You've destroyed records. It's not just a question of you forgot them. If you've destroyed them or tried to hide them, that means you're maliciously evil, and you have no respect for the public's opinion, and you have no respect for truth, so you're not allowed to work for the government again, ever. That's the way it should be. And no one's even talking about that. They're talking about how much of a security problem was there and how far did it go. It doesn't matter. If she didn't return all her records, she's guilty of a felony. Period. No one is denying this. No one. Dan FP said one change, and that's add term limits. At the risk of losing some of these great questions, I'm going to get into that because that's one of my points. Dan, I'm just going to segue right into that, baby. When we talk about a 20-year or 30-year or 40-year plan to restore America, we have to obviously understand that if we don't do anything now, we're not going to be here 40 years later. It doesn't matter. There will be no America as we understand it. When the Department of Justice is the single most corrupt organization in the United States government, you got an actual problem here. So what he was saying was term limits, and to say the least. If I were to start a new political party, or if I was to start an online political party, or if I was asked to be an advisor, I've said this 100 times, I'm going to say it one more time. I think after 2016, it has to be very clear to both sides. But one of the things in my plan is very simple. We need not just a new politician, we need a new kind of politician. And it's pretty simple. We asked somebody, hey, would you like to go to the U.S. Senate? They said, I sure would. They said, you are disqualified from the job. We have to find people that don't want to go. We have to find people that beg not to go. We have to find people who look at a stint as a U.S. congressman as 2 years of jury duty that he simply cannot get out of. He just can't get out of it. He's just stuck. It's a case of insurance fraud, and you're going to be in that chair for 2 years. Nobody should want to do this job. Nobody. And the reaction of the new kind of politician should be pretty much verbatim this. I can't possibly go and run for office. I can't afford it. I cannot leave my family. I especially can't leave my business. I've got things to do here. Those are not the kind of people we send to Washington. If you want the job, you can't have it. If you're determined that you cannot possibly do the job, you're the kind of person we want. Now, obviously, we're not going to recruit these people at gunpoint, although I've given that some thought. What you have to do is you have to appeal to people's patriotism. Is that somebody knocking at the door? Somebody out there? Poltergeist problem here. You have to appeal to somebody's patriotism and say, I know you don't want to go, but the country needs you. It's the same kind of appeal that we make to people in the military every day. Now, the term limits thing is very interesting. And I say a new kind of politicians and a new kind of politics. I personally think that the American people would back this idea. 80% of them would back this idea. You have to convince people that don't want to go, that have their own businesses, that they're the kind of people we need to send against their will. And if I was running the party, I would have one party platform plank, one. And it is this. There will be no re-election to the same office, ever, period. I think if you went to the American people with that, they would fall down on their knees and worship you as a god. If you basically said to the American people, the policy of our party is that no one can be re-elected to the same office. You want term limits? There's your term limit. 1 term. What? You heard me, 1 term. What? They won't have enough time to be effective. No, on the contrary. They'll have exactly enough time to be effective. They'll know they've got 2 years to get done what needs to get done back home. Now, the beautiful thing about this is, if you actually say this to the American people seriously, no re-election to the same office. If you're a congressman, you can become a senator. That's fine. If you're doing a great job, good, let's keep you. But no re-election. What does it mean? It means that, first of all, there's no money in politics. All of the corruption in politics, either from corporations or from unions or all the rest, is to pay politicians to help their election. Excuse me. We're going to give you a big sack of money to help you get reelected, and then you're going to make laws that are favorable to us. That's how it works. Well, if you have no reelection, you're immune to that kind of influence, right? You're immune to it. It's not just a question that you have to resist the temptation. They're not going to spend the money on you. They're not going to come after you in the first place. Why would they? They can't have any influence on you because you're going home. You don't owe them anything. So that's the operational aspect of it that's so appealing. But see, the beautiful thing about this is it leads you into the moral reason for it. And the moral reason is this a government of the people, yes or no? Can the American people govern themselves, yes or no? Or does it require a priesthood or an aristocracy? Because that's the way it's been for many decades now. I believe, and our party believes, that out of 320 million Americans, we should be able to find 525 of them that are fully competent, fully capable from all across the political spectrum, who go there for 1 term, solve the problems that they have back home, and then they go home in glory instead of staying there for 35 years and doing anything possible to keep in the limousines and the private jets and all the other things that they couldn't afford if they had to go get them in the private sector. That would revolutionize American politics. And I think American politics are overdue, ripe, and prime for a revolution. which is another one of these meta problems that I told you about, or meta issues. This might be the ultimate bow to wrap all this stuff up in. We are in a revolution. We are seeing an absolute coup, a palace coup, where the Praetorian Guard is the media. They're protecting the Empress, and they're determined to get her on the throne so that she can begin her retaliations. That's what's happening. But there's no violence, because there doesn't need to be. There's intimidation. There's social proof, which is a form of self-intimidation. They've got that weapon absolutely maximized. But it is, in fact, a revolution against the idea of people running their own government. The violations of the Commerce Clause alone are a direct coup d'etat against the Constitution. So, the meta problem is that we have to understand that this is a revolution. And just because we're not fighting it on the streets with AR-15s as we thought we would, that doesn't mean it's not real. We always prepare to fight the last war, right? And so we thought, well, the next American Revolution is going to consist of us with our rifles fighting against the government or whoever. What if it's not? What if it's not? What if that is an outdated way to do this? Look, I'm not giving up my rifle, don't get me wrong. That's the ultimate fallback position. However, the thing that I keep realizing is this is, in fact, a battle of ideas and stories and winning over people. I can flip a progressive in 15 minutes. I've done it all the time, one-on-one. And we've got to get there. So this battle is a real battle, and we should be putting the kind of resources that we put into the last wars. We should be putting something like the kind of resources that we put into the military, because this is where the fight is, and people can't get their heads around that. No. I mean, what happens when it really comes to it? It's already coming to it, don't you see? The country's split in half. It's intentional. They're trying to split us in half. The people that are going to win this American Revolution are not going to be the George Washington who's able to rally an army through the icy winter of Valley Forge. It's going to be a storyteller who can rally the American people through the icy winter of being demonized in the pop culture for 15 or 20 years. It's going to take a battle of ideas, and it's going to take people that understand this, because the left understands this very well. And we're going to have to come back, and we're going to have to get in this game hard. And that's basically the big problem. I don't quite see it. I'm sorry, I'd scroll down. Normally give you credit. By the way, I'm so sorry to mention this. Somebody somewhere in the last couple, 10, 15 minutes had question number 2000, according to CSR Gifted Actual, who is more, once again, guarding the vaults of the Stratosphere Lounge with his flaming sword. Somewhere back there, he's probably got it written down. We passed 2,000 questions in the history of the Stratosphere Lounge. Think about that, folks. That's easily 30 or 40 solid answers. Anyway, yeah. I'm sorry, the question was about the bureaucracy. What do we do about the bureaucracy? Well, you could do something, and I got cheers out every time I speak about it. You just sack them. And it used to be this way. It used to be, in fact, not too long ago, when a president was elected, he brought his cabinet with him. He brought his bureaucrats with him. The guy his chief of staff now for this senator is the guy who was his financial manager back at his little business, or it was his accountant. That's the new guy. It used to happen all the time. Whenever somebody would be elected, the first thing you do is fire everybody who's on the staff. Makes sense to me. It really does. Makes a lot of sense. There's lots and lots of cases of staff members, pretending to listen to their new bosses, and then just secretly working behind the scenes to get what they want done. It's like deception for these people is what they do. I mean, look, you just don't have to look at Hillary Clinton. She's the apex predator of this system of belief. So they don't mind cheating. They don't care. So you go in there with the new bureaucracy. Now, the line I've said that's gotten some cheers before is, I was talking to Alan West, and he said, you get there and your head is spinning. You're just become elected to the U.S. Congress, and you walk up into the Capitol building. It's almost mind-numbing. Realize the achievement and the sense of responsibility and all the rest. He said, but very, very quickly they have freshman orientation, like they have in college for little children. And during freshman orientation, either the party leaders, the elders, and many of the bureaucrats essentially tell you how things work in Washington. You will hear this term again and again and again and again and again and again and again. That's not how we do things here, sir. I'm sorry. That's not how things work in Washington. Washington doesn't work that way. It'd be nice if we could do it, Major West, Colonel West, but Washington just doesn't work that way. And what the representatives that we send to Congress have to do is say, I represent the people of California's 4th Congressional District. I was sent here by 750,000 people to represent their interests. You don't tell me how Washington's going to work. I'm going to tell you how Washington's going to work. This is how we're going to do things. Okay? You don't tell me what to do. You're an unelected, minor, petty bureaucrat, and you do not represent the American people. I do. You're fired. Now let's find somebody who can get what I just talked about happening. You do that, you're on your way. I think if you present this whole palette to the American people, they will just vibrate because they understand it, and young people understand it too. You know, I was talking to this, like I said, a pretty hostile crowd. It's the kind of messaging that we need. A largely hostile crowd. How many of you are Republicans? And a few of them raised their hands. You know, how many of you are Democrats? You know, significantly more. How many of you are Bernie supporters? And the crowd just went nuts. I mean, they went nuts. 9 out of 10 of them, woo, Bernie, Bernie, Bernie. So I said to them, all right, so Bernie is a self-acknowledged socialist, and I'm standing here as a conservative Tea Party guy who was probably more closely aligned to Ted Cruz than anybody else. Now, you would think that we'd be exactly opposite each other, that we'd be diametrically opposed, and this is how we've been thinking for the last 20 years, which is why the country is in the trouble it's in, because we think like we're enemies. And I said to these kids, I said, but let's just think about something, okay? One of the things that you like most about Bernie is that Bernie promises to get corporate money out of government. And one of the things I like about my philosophy is it promises to get government out of corporations. So you've got chocolate in my peanut butter, and I got peanut butter on your chocolate. We both agree on different reasons, but we both agree that the mixture of government and business is bad for both of them. So even though we're supposed to be opposed to each other, we both firmly believe that government and business should be separated. So there's a start. It's just pretty simple, really. And that kind of messaging can change this world. So to answer your question about what happens on November 9th, Dan, I just am going to come out of the gate selling this program. And I'm going to start an entirely new video series. And it's going to look different. It's going to feel different. And my tone is going to be different. It's going to be a lot less antagonistic. It's basically going to be introducing Americans back to America. And if you make it red meat for our side, I'll keep doing some of these things, then you won't get people. And you have to be prepared to make concessions. And you don't have to concede a single one of your core values. See, this is the thing. I'm not giving up any of these values. But I realize that so many times the unwillingness to reach out to people just comes from just plain stubborn pride. It's just pride. I'm right and they're wrong, and I've been fighting them forever, and the last thing I'm going to do is admit that they're right about this or tell them they've got a point there. That's just pride. And the question is, would you rather have your pride or your country? It's not a tough issue for me once I saw it clearly enough. So it's going to be interesting, and I certainly would need all the support I can get. So we're hoping to have a big wave. And by the way, we just hired a terrific social media company that's been working for Turning Point USA. So we're going to see a significant increase in reach. I don't know if that's going to translate into membership, but I got a good feeling about it. Yes, Brent D. Cates, it is a new series. I don't want to cheat the name of it. I'll keep that as a surprise, but the look is completely different. The clothes I'm wearing is completely different, are completely different. My tone's completely different. It could be much, much shorter. And if somebody needs a firewall thrown at them, then that's what I'll do. But this is where we really have a chance to not move to the middle, move the middle to us. My God, there's so many great questions here. I kind of answered that one, Susan Speakman, sorry. This is great. James LeBlanc says, hey, Bill, something I've noticed is that many American conservatives, when talking about other countries, dismiss them as lost causes. As a Canadian conservative, I find this very disheartening, as sometimes it seems there's no hope, especially when American liberals interfere in our politics. For instance, Obama sent his campaign team to advise Justin Trudeau in the 2015 election that ended 11 years of conservative government. I get the impression that American conservatives have adopted a defensive stance only to preserve limited government in its heartland instead of exporting it. So my question to you is, do you think that conservatives need to be more aggressive in their networking among different countries in order to halt and reverse the socialism that has affected them in different degrees? Thanks again for your effort. I hope one day all of us can have sane governments again. James, that's terrific. The thing I think most of us have problems is what's this line about other countries? I'm trying to grasp what that means. We are obviously a self-centered people, and that is in many ways bad, in a lot of ways good. First of all, as far as Canada is concerned, prior to 2015, Canada was a better run country than America for many years, and I went up to an event a couple of events in Canada where I basically said, so you've got a freer country than we do. It's a painful thing for me to say, but it's true. And now, of course, they've been seduced by Trudeauism because the Conservatives come in, get the economy running, everyth's humming along, and the second things are humming along, people say, let's pick that fine-looking guy who's got a great smile, and then things go to hell again. First of all, I feel your pain. Secondly, it's a superb point. We have to, I think, look, I've done so much talking, so many live events, so many back and forths and questions and answers, and I realize that one of the big problems, and this is another part of the plan, is the branding. We have to just drop the Republican name, and we should probably drop the conservative name. It doesn't mean you drop the values. It means if you've got a product that has been that badly damaged, both externally by the competition and internally by bad management, then it's cheaper and it's more effective and it's a shorter time frame to start a new brand than it is to recover a brand that is in that kind of bad shape. It can be done. It's a reboot. So once I realized that, James, I realized that having talked about things in front of live audiences many times, I'm trying to figure out what labels make sense. Are we conservatives? Yes, we're conservatives, but we're conserving classical liberal ideas. The liberals are talking about being progressives and going forward. Some of these ideas go back to 150 BC. They didn't work then either. So everybody gets wrapped up in Democrat, Republican, liberal, conservative, and so on. And none of these really are the issue. And I gave it a great deal of thought, and I'm sure other people have too. And I've come to believe that the only two terms that really are accurate terms throughout history and throughout the world geographically is collectivists and individualists. Those are essentially the two way the human brains are wired. Are you a collectivist or are you an individualist? I know it's drinking time out there, but collectivists are selected and individualists are K-selected. So you have to convince people that individualism is better than collectivism. Now, you would think that would be easy. And it is, if you have any sense of story and you know what you're doing. You can certainly talk to young people and say, how many of you want to be told what to do? And they'll say, none of us. We want to be able to do whatever we want to. I say, okay, well, then the Boston Tea Party, what was that? What was the Boston Tea Party? Anybody know? Well, I'll tell you, the Boston Tea Party was a bunch of college guys who got all liquored up because somebody started charging them for what used to be free Wi-Fi. So they went in and trashed the place. And people laugh, and then they start to understand. That's exactly what it was. We were getting our Wi-Fi for free, now they're charging us? No way, screw that. So you have to convince people that individualism is more important than collectivism. Now, the problem here is that most people would say, I'd love to keep my individual rights, and they don't understand how it's a problem voting for big state people when they've still got the right to do whatever they want to and go where they want to and stay up late and so on. So you have to show them that that individualism is better than collectivism where they're going to apply it. They're going to say, well, what about poor people? What about these hopeless people? And they're right, folks. We've got to come to this realization. What about these people in the inner cities? And we say, oh, just bootstrap yourself up. I did. And I know many people who have, but I also know many people who haven't because they can't, because they're too badly damaged. They never had the parenting. They never had the you want to say they never had the puppy? That's fine with me. It's fine with me. I'm telling you, there are people who are out there who cannot improve their own lives on their own. And so what are fundamentally virtuous, good young people look at these situations with homeless people and all the rest of it, And they say somebody needs to do something about that. And up step the progressives and say the answer is more government. And we just walk away. No, it isn't. And we walk away. This is why we lose, and why we're going to continue to lose until somebody puts the plan in front of the American people and says, well, look, this is actually the single most important point of the plan. It's point 5 of the plan, and that is you have to address progressive grievances. You have to address them, and you have to deal with them honestly, and you have to have a better idea than they do. I will try to present this video within the next day or two. They shot this whole thing, but at the Q&A with these kids, and really overwhelmingly, kids, I was speaking the truth to them in a way they've never heard before. You said that Black Lives Matter kills people. Why can you say that? Don't you think that's racist? I said, no. Here's one statistic. There's only one statistic you need to know about Black Lives Matter. 2014, 6,095 blacks were killed in America, homicides, and of that 695, 257 of them were by policemen. That most of them were resisting, and many of them were armed. But that's 4%. It's 4% of the total black homicides in 2014 were committed by policemen. So if you're telling me that you're starting a national movement to address the 4%, and you're absolutely ignoring, not just putting in second place, you are turning your back away from and specifically hiding the 96%, then that is, in fact, a political organization, and it's racism. It's racism. You're looking for a reason to attack policemen and attack the structures of society. If I had 96 out of 100 people being killed by one kind of fish, and then I decided to start hunting for the other kind of fish, you'd think I was mad, and you'd be right. So they're not used to it. And then they start saying things, well, what about, why are black people, pulled over more often, innocent black people pulled over by policemen? That's not fair. I said, it's not fair. I agree it's not fair that an innocent person being pulled over more often as a black person than a white person isn't fair, but the reason it happens is because blacks commit so much more crime than whites do proportionally. And the room just, you know what it did? It wasn't like screaming at me. It wasn't like yelling at me. It's a wave through this room. And what I remember seeing most, because when you're in the moment, it's a little tough, but I remember watching hundreds and hundreds of young people turn to each other and just say, I can't believe he said that. I can't believe it. There you go. ATS 608 talks about charity as a solution. Obviously, charity is the solution. Actual charity is voluntary. If it's coercive, it's not charity. It's stealing. When you get to actual charities and you take the needs down to the lowest level, to a church group or a veterans group, you're getting customized service by people who know everybody on the ground, and they're all friends. It's less expensive, a lot less expensive, and it's dispersed, and it's just a lot more effective. But we have to have a solution to these things, because if we don't have a solution to these things, if we do what we continue to do, which is just walk away from it, then we're going to keep losing, because people are kind, fundamentally kind in America. It's just that they're so badly educated that they don't understand that what they're voting for is making the problem worse. This one person got up and read a prepared, it was a manifesto. You talk about how a brain surgeon should make more money than a 7-Eleven clerk. But what about a 7-Eleven clerk who wanted to be a brain surgeon but can't be a brain surgeon because of the structural racism built into this society? And the crowd just erupts into cheers. The cheers are standing up. They're just screaming at the top of their lungs. They're just so proud that somebody has stood up to the conservative guy and laid out the law and laid out the case. How do you justify? What do you tell a person who's black who may want to be a brain surgeon? How does your argument about equality of opportunity deal with them? And I let the room quiet down and just sat there, just cheering and cheering. And just take your time. I want you to make sure you get out of your system. I got a lot of time here. So when it quieted down, I said, "Do you know who the best brain surgeon in the country is?" And she didn't. I said, "He may likely is the best brain surgeon in the world." No idea. Okay, his name's Ben Carson, and Ben Carson is a black American. And Ben Carson came from a family that was so poor that they didn't have shoes. Ben Carson wanted to just goof off, but Ben Carson's mother said, "No, you have to read for an hour." He didn't want to read for an hour, but she made him. She made him do more reading. She made him work chores as well. She worked a bunch of jobs, got him to school, made sure he did his homework. And Ben Carson is now the best brain surgeon in the country, and he came from nothing. So don't tell me it can't happen. And it's not an exception. Ben Carson is not an exception because he snuck through some kind of bureaucratic roadblocks. If you were talking about this back in 1830, you'd have an excellent case, but we're not in 1830 anymore. Ben Carson did it by himself, and to have that in my pocket handy pretty much shut her up. This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is like what I just did there was like a skirmish. It was like a patrol in Vietnam. I certainly don't mean to equate myself with the personal heroism of people in the Army, but in terms of what's at stake and how the war is being fought, that was a skirmish and an ambush, and we fought our way out of it. And I think we did pretty good. Took a couple casualties, but we took more of them with us than they took of us, and we converted some people. So this is the battle. It's a battle of stories. Anyway, let's see if I can. I'm sorry. I do occasionally wander just a little bit. So collectivists versus individualists, James, and those people exist all around the world. And you're absolutely right. We need to make this argument international. I think at the first steps we have to make it American so that we can get it in place, but then immediately we start making the case that look, conservatism works for everybody. It does. It actually does. It doesn't just work for Ben Carson. It would work for anybody in the inner city, and it would work for any 7-Eleven clerk. These ideas actually work. So if they work for me and they work for you, why don't they work for everybody? Turns out they do. They've just never been practiced. And that's when I hit her back with this moral thing. I know you're trying to say, everybody big cheer for you because of how moral you are and how much you care about Black America and all the rest of it. But the fact is, it's your policies, not my policies, that have turned Black America into this cesspit of violence and rage and hopelessness. Not mine. Democrats have been running these cities for 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 years uninterrupted. Not a Republican mayor, not a Republican council, ever. It's your policies that have made Black Americans suffer this rate of murder and hopelessness and drug abuse because of people like you who stand up and try and tell everybody how good you are while your policies simply destroy this community. And I'm sick of watching it. I'm tired of watching Black people get murdered by other Black people. I care too much about this country and about them to sit there and be willing to put my head down and bow to your essential point of view because you're trying to paint me as a racist. I think the high point of that particular day, which was this last Saturday, was when the guy who invited me, he's a really great guy named Justin. He's 14, so he's a little gangly, and he brought me here. He was a fan and brought me to be the opening speaker of this 3-day weekend or something. And it's always been very sedate, introduction, talking about government and talking about this and that and so on. We were yelling. People were yelling at the top of their lungs, but they weren't angry. They were morally outraged, which is a different thing. And they were thinking. And my favorite moment personally was this. Poor Justin saw this raucousness and basically got up to the podium and said, now, hold on now, look, I know there's a lot of passions running very high here and everything, but we need to understand that this is a guest of ours and we need to respect the speaker. We need to respect the speaker, so we need to keep it, we need to quiet it down. And respect the speaker. And he sat down, and I went right up to the microphone and I said, I don't want to disagree with Justin, but I don't give a damn if you respect me at all. And the room I don't know what that noise was, but the second I said it, whether you respect me or not, I just don't care. And there's just a sound. It wasn't like anger, it was just shock. It was just this giant collective gasp. I said, no, I'm serious. I don't care whether you respect me or not. I don't care what you think about me, but you better respect the truth. Because we've been talking about the truth, and you've never heard the truth before. And you notice nobody's denying the truth. They're just saying I shouldn't be saying it. I said, this is the truth. And if we're not willing to speak the truth, then we'll never solve these problems, which appears to be fine with you. You don't want to just keep this thing going so you can feel good. You don't want to solve the problems, because if you want to solve problems, we have to speak the truth. If you want to solve Black people being murdered, you have to go after the 96% before you go after the 4%. You can go at both. But I don't care about me. You have to respect the truth. And that got a bit of attention, I think. And I said, and by the way, if you don't respect the truth, you don't belong here. You don't belong in this room, and you don't belong in this country. How can you say that? This moral relativism. I said, okay, you think I'm wrong? Yeah, how dare you tell us that we can't belong in this room? Okay, fine. Quiet down for a second. Raise your hand if your political philosophy and personal belief system is based on lying. Just raise your hand if you believe that serial lying or lying when it's convenient is in fact the way to do business, not only politically, but among your own self. Raise your hand if that's your personal philosophy. Not one. Not one. Not one. And then I said, okay, so you agree. We have to respect the truth in here. And of all the things that have ever happened to me in my career, this was certainly one of the top 3. After it was over, this one young man who I got into the spiciest arguments with, he was literally walking around like he couldn't believe that I could be kind of this stupid. And we went back and forth, and I said, and I don't want to, and if it turns, I was pointing to him, I said, if it turns out that lying is in fact your moral code, then I don't, whether or not you belong in this room, I don't want to be in the same room as you. And I certainly don't want people like you running this country. And that got some applause from the good guys. And so after this thing was over, the kids go out into the hall. They're just vibrating and just bouncing off of each other. And I stayed in the front, and a bunch of people came down to say hi. And probably 3rd or 4th in line, I was surprised to see this young man who was presenting this liberal case for all of these things. And I thought, here he comes. He's going to give it to me now. He's going to give me the big, He walked up to me and he shook my hand. He said, I really respect you for coming in here against these kind of odds and speaking your mind the way you did. I've never seen anybody do it before. And I just want to tell you I really do respect it, and I'm sorry about the language being as harsh as it was. I said, and I apologize if I used language that isolated you either. The entire idea of the country is this here, right now, this handshake. This is the whole thing. It's not about agreement. It's not about lockstep. It's not about one philosophy. It's about this. It's about the fact that we can argue the truth and have passionate discussions about the right way to get there, but we want to get to the same place, and we don't have to hate each other for it. And that's why that's why this country exists. And man, it was a high point of my year, certainly, to have that young man who seemed to me such a lost cause case, champion of progressivism, come over and say, I really respect you and thank you for coming, and I'm sorry if it got a little heated. I certainly didn't mean to insult you. I was like, oh my God, that's unbelievable. Yeah, it was amazing. So yes, internationally is a giant pool of people who want things done as well. James, you're right. And not just existing in Canada. I think all of Europe is essentially going through what America is going through now, which is a revolution against the elitists who tell us to believe things that we know are not true. And they tell us to believe things that aren't true that are true. They tell us these things, and they've been telling us through all of these organs that they've overtaken in 40 years. And not only the American people are rebelling against this is what Trump is. Trump is here because Trump speaks the truth. He has so many flaws as a candidate, in my personal opinion. He has so many flaws. And his position on the truth has moved around so much, it makes people like me very suspicious, and I don't have a problem admitting that. But he speaks the truth about things that nobody else does. And that's why he's the Republican nominee, because people are tired of being told to believe things that just aren't true. And the Brexit was the same thing. All of the elites said, no, there's no way this is going to happen. And when it did happen, they had a meltdown. They had a nervous collapse. And they spent the next 2 months trying to convince the British people of the mistake they've made. No, you don't understand. I understand you voted this way, but you don't understand how wrong your vote was. We need to do it again. We need to vote again. We need to try it over. No, this is not the result that we wanted, so we need to do it again. And this attitude is what we're rebelling against right now in this election, and we're going to either get a tourniquet on or we are going to be in big trouble. Time's pretty good. I had such great questions, and I wanted to get through as many as I could here. I got a lot to do tonight. Daniel Frampton comes alive with this question. If Hillary wins, what will the next glass ceiling be for Democrats? The first transgender president? The first Muslim president? The first president with a slight limp? Or how about this? And this would be great. The first woman president not to be totally corrupt and generally awful. Care to speculate, Bill? Daniel, this is exactly it. We get accused of being anti-black, we're anti-woman, we're all this. It's like, no, I'm not against a woman president, and I'm not against a black president. I'm against these individuals because they're horrible people. Horrible. And the reason they're horrible people is because they've been selected because they're a woman and because they're black. That's your entire plan. You're collectivists. And so you needed a black president, and this guy was handy, and then you needed a woman president, and she was around. That's not how it should be done. Individualists say, who's the best person for the job? If you actually believe that women and men are capable of doing the same job, then this should not disqualify women in any way. The best person in the country should be president. The best person who's at least up for election should be president. And it's not time to have a female president. It's time to have a good president who's a woman. And if they do win this election, they're going to get exactly what they want. They're going to get the first female president. They're going to get the first female president to be actively removed from office. They're going to get the first female president to be walked into a prison in chains. So if that's what you want for your historic first, go ahead. You could have had both, with Condoleezza Rice. You could have had the first black president, the first woman president, and I would sleep at enormous ease at night knowing that Condoleezza Rice was running this country. Because she's smart and she's not a victim and she got where she got to on her own. And she's tough and she's kind. She's terrific. I'd vote for her in a heartbeat. But that's not what they want. They don't want the first good president who's a woman. They want the first woman president and the devil take whatever is left over when this lunatic is elected. So there's that. By the way, I would say this in terms of glass ceiling, Daniel, in terms of the next president, I'm going to be making pretty strong case that the next president, if you vote for the turnip, would be the first. Hillary would be the first woman president. That's historic. But if you vote for the turnip, that would be America's first vegetable president, and that would be historic as well. So you've got a historic opportunity on both sides here. You can either elect the first woman president, or you could elect the first vegetable president. But either way, history is about to be made here. And this is the kind of messaging I just love to do. Okay. Chris Johnson says, with the talk of voter fraud already in full swing and early voters discussing switching their votes, how likely do you think it is that we'll have another hanging Chad situation? I foresee multiple recounts in swing states in our future. Do you agree? Very respectfully, Chris Johnson. Thank you, Chris. It's very nice of you to refer to me in that way. Very, very nice and polite. As I said earlier, I don't think this is going to be a close election. Certainly not close enough to be thrown to the courts or, tied up in endless recounts. I just don't. I may be wrong. Nothing in this year would surprise me. If Trump wins all states, if 50 of them, I wouldn't be surprised. And if she wins 50, I wouldn't be surprised. And if the dime lies on its edge, we flip a dime in the air and it lands on its edge and it's a tie, and that wouldn't surprise me either. But I don't think that's how it's going to go. The voter fraud issue, I think we talked about earlier, but I think what's interesting here is the idea of people discussing switching their votes, and some people are saying, I think there's some talk about people who've already voted who want to change their votes. There's some conversation about whether or not they could do that, which is why we have something called Election Day, and which is why vote early, which is what you see at every Democratic sign, every Democratic rally is a sign that says vote early, and they forget the second half, which is vote early and vote often. Vote early. What the Democrats are trying to say is, why wait until the election? Lock up your Democratic vote now. Send it in now. Politically, it makes a lot of sense in terms of if you're determined to have power at any cost. But there are two problems with voting early. There should not be early voting. Early voting simply should be illegal. It was illegal for the longest time. We have an election day for two reasons. The first reason is you cannot be in two places at the same time, generally speaking. If you live in Pennsylvania and you have a residence in Maryland and you're registered to vote in both countries, it's harder to do it if it's on the same day. Certainly if you live in Nevada and you live in South Carolina and you want to vote in both places, it's very difficult to do on the same day. So number one, Election Day reduces the chance of people voting more than once. And I'd be completely in favor of dipping our finger in purple ink until we get this republic back on its feet and we have fair actual voting. If you need to dye my finger like they did with Iraq and other third world countries, I am ready to go. If that's what it takes, that'd be fine with me. Did you vote already? Looks like you did. That's the first thing about early voting. And the second thing about early voting is, if you vote a month early, or 2 months early, why not vote 4 years early? Why not vote in the 2020 election now? You won't know what the candidate is until the moment of decision. And the Hillary thing's a perfect example. People can melt down. These October surprises can happen. All kinds of things. If you vote before this horrific procedure is over, then I think you're just setting yourself up to have buyer's remorse. I'm not going to vote at the earliest opportunity. I'm going to vote at the latest opportunity. I'm going to vote on the last day available to me, which is November 8th. That's the last day I can vote in this country. unless I'm running for Senate in Minnesota. So I don't want to vote on the earliest day. I want to vote on the latest day. I want to have all the information we can have about both these people before I make my decision. And again, I think if you say things like that, I don't want to vote on the earliest day. I want to vote on the latest day. What's the latest I can vote? People start to listen to you. This is a war of ideas. It's not about bayonets or battleships, as I've said a few times. Looks like 3 to go. Yeah, why not? Karsten Mueller writes, as much as I would like to see Mr. Trump getting the election, he certainly has the popular vote for sure. The problem is the electoral vote. We cast our vote, but since the electoral is not bound to our vote, they can vote how they feel. It leaves the door open for someone sinister to pay off some electorals. I think surely means electors, to secure the election. Isn't it much better for the electoral to be bound to the people's vote? Sorry, I got a little confused with the terminology. Basically, this is a kind of an inside baseball question. Speaking of which, I don't know if anybody's got the Cubs score, but we were talking about it earlier. It's being recorded right as they play the 7th game of the World Series. I talked earlier about the benefits of the Electoral College, and that doesn't need to be repeated. But the idea is actually interesting, is that according to the Constitution as written, they're morally bound to vote for the person that won their state, but they're not legally bound. And one of the reasons for this, I think, is for the same reason. It's a circuit breaker against the madness of crowds. It's an actual circuit breaker against election fever. It's a circuit breaker against this kind of early voting thing. It's a circuit breaker against deciding too early. If somebody gets elected and something appalling happens, there is still theoretically a way to legally stop this massacre. The founders of this country were very, very concerned about the tendency of democracies to go running this way and that way, depending on which way the wind is blowing. And the Germans voted their democracy away, and so did the Soviets, or the Russians voted it away. Hey, the Cubbies won. They won the World Series. I can't believe it. How about that? There's going to be some happy people out there. So we put in these circuit breakers to stop tyranny. And if it turns out that between the election and the vote of the Electoral College, which used to be in March, has been moved up to January now, there's never been a case that I'm aware of where, there've been individuals that flip their vote and so on, but never changed the course of an election. But it's there if you need it. It's a circuit breaker. It's a fuse, and it's not a fuse that gets blown very often. It would require something extremely major. However, it's there if we need it, I think. So I'd like to keep it there, actually. Beth Tracy Albert asks, was enjoying lunch with my son at a barbecue hole in the wall near Dayton Air Force Museum today. Two fellows came in talking about election stuff, polling methods, etc. One tells the other how much he gets from listening to this guy, Bill Whittle, on internet show Right Angle. The conversation was very highbrow chatter, so I couldn't interrupt. Son and I had a little thrill run up our leg to hear Bill's name in an apparently highly intellectual discussion. Carry on. Thank you very much. It's very kind of you, Beth. If as you say, they were talking about somebody interesting who really had things down named Bill Whittle, it's undoubtedly that other guy who's, I think, a financial guy out there named Bill Whittle. That must be certainly who they're listening to. And the fact that they mentioned Right Angle is a real red flag warning sign. That they would consider this intellectual content when really what it is. Oh, it's not over. Somebody says Cubs 6, Indians 3 at the bottom of the 8th. Anyway, yeah. I guess that's all I have to say about that. I just wanted to take it to add a little snark, but thank you very much, Beth. Beth is very kind. It's always nice to hear about things like that. Okay, we got 2 to go. Kurt Von Arnold asks, "G'day, Bill." G'day, mate. The greatest threat to democracy, and I know that America is a constitutional republic, now seems to me, after watching this election, the destruction of a free, objective press. Your founding fathers, knowing full well the corrupting influence of power and the vagaries of human nature, sought to create a system of government that would mitigate, if not prevent, the impulse to tyranny. What they did not anticipate was the power and influence an all-pervasive media would have on the culture. You've talked extensively about destroying the Iron Triangle. That would be inserting here the progressive politicians in Washington, the progressive news media in New York, and the progressive culture machine in Washington. And I agree 100% with your analysis, but how do we actually do that? You've also talked about the need for conservatism to have a plan. So what is the plan for the media? How do we get half the country on board for a divest, delegitimize, and destroy program against the MSM, the mainstream media? Kurt, I've answered most of this earlier, and hopefully that satisfied most of your questions here. But there's one word in this that is interesting, and I'm just going to tease it again. It's interesting because it's been missing, and the word is plan. Now, I have come to believe, as I said many times, I do not believe in hierarchical structures. I do not believe that it's the future. I know it's not the future. And when I say a plan, I don't mean something that's issued from the top down or orders or anything like that. But if you think about it, the left for 40 years has had a plan. They've had a plan, and they haven't changed the plan. The Frankfurt School plan is divide America up into tribes, put the tribes at war against the center, use political correctness to defend against any kind of a counterattack, infiltrate the colleges because we start with young people, and especially infiltrate journalism schools so that you get a progressive teacher in there and he teaches nothing but progressive students, and those progressive students go into the news media or go into teaching other journalism students, and after 2 generations or so, you got the whole thing locked up. So they had a plan, and we need a plan too. We have to have a plan, and I think our plan should be pretty much like their plan. I'll just tell you what my plan is. Number one, you have to ammo up kids about America. You have to introduce American to the American people in a way that young people not only understand but enthusiastically employ. You have to make this message cool, and you have to make it interesting and sexy if you can, and you have to give young Americans who are on board with this something that they can be proud of, that they can show, and not have it be like grandma's sweater on them. The second thing we have to do is get into the pop culture, and that's a whole big discussion, but even little movies are important. American Sniper just panicked Hollywood because it showed the military in a good light, and that did a lot of good for our side. The third thing you have to do is you have to understand the media is not going to change, so we have to develop these immediate news gathering capability of everybody in the country, because it's an Uber of reporters where anybody with a phone can get news on the internet immediately. And Pixar, it didn't happen. We need video evidence. The fourth thing is we have to find a new kind of politician and a new kind of politics. And the final thing is we have to understand that if we do not address the issues of the progressives and we leave those things on the table, then the progressives will pick them up and they will beat us to death with them. And that's certainly what has happened over the last 40 years. Can't walk away from these issues. You just can't. You want to. I kind of want to as well, but you can't. Got to go right at them. And then you apply conservative principles that work to these progressive problems, and you got a winner there. So, yes, thank you very much, Kurt. We need a plan. And I think this is the last one. Jared Bennett asks, many people these days are questioning whether or not the system of government we have now is the best for the American people. Do you believe that we've simply lost touch with our roots and need to return to something closer to the system we first had? Or has technology enabled us to come up with a new political system that can do a better job of allowing the individual to exercise power over the state? I'm so glad we ended with that question, because we're talking about a new kind of politician and a new kind of politics. Categorically, yes in one way and no in another. The method we use to govern this nation is superb. It's superb. Oh my God, look at this. It looks like the Cubbies are going to tie game now. If the Cubs lose this game, by the way, it will be the biggest heartbreak in the history of the world. Anyway, so the system works beautifully. The idea of the people electing representatives and then having those representatives be citizens who then return back to the public is a very good way to go. But over the course, really since the beginning, it's turned into a priesthood. Washington and several of the other founders, but Washington especially, had a major concern about political parties and the corruption and the anti-democratic qualities they would bring. So just very quickly, it's hard to watch this finish this thought when apparently this Game 7 of the World Series is tied in the 8th inning. It's just amazing. But in a short form, here it is. What is a political party? A political party is a group of people who have more or less the same values and therefore can go out in a block. It's that way you get people. Let's just say, for example, if you're running on a pro-gun platform, you're going to get all the pro-gun people, and then you get all of those people's other opinions as well because they've decided to vote for the guns. So a political party is simply a group of people that share an opinion, more or less, about what they want to see done. And I certainly don't think the Republicans represent the American people anymore, and I don't believe the Democrats do either. I think the huge middle of this country is sick of it, and they want something that works. And so the question is, can you move into that space? We did a segment on the Pirate Party in Iceland, which looked like it was going to win, but I think actually had some setbacks. But the idea of an online political party is just as good as anything else. I mean, it would work. And I plan to find out, because if you can influence 20 million votes or even 5 million votes, you can change the future of the world. And we're going to see if we can or not. And you know what? I just can't concentrate anymore on this. It was the last question anyway, so it's a good place to end. I'm going to close this show out with the score tied in the bottom of the 8th inning, Indians and Cubs, apparently with the Indians with a runner on base. I am going to be dealing with that, and I just got another text. And if the Cubs lose this, they're going to be the most heartbroken people in the world. But if they win it, I think they're going to be the most heartbroken people in the world starting next week, in a way that they don't understand yet. Okay, well, that's been a great show, a lot of fun. Thank you. Episode 134, I want to say. And I am going to hit the button, Frank, and we will see what happens next week. I won't be able to be here next week. I'm going to be in Florida at the Horowitz Freedom Center. So it'll be 2 weeks before we see you, but we'll certainly talk before then. So get out there and vote your conscience, and there's going to be a November 9th, and we'll all be here one way or another, especially those of us here at BillWhittle.com. Thanks especially to the members who pay to keep all this stuff coming. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time for episode 135.